अगली जो बंद है ये उन लोगों के नाम जो हमें हर वक्त बताते रहते हैं सरहद के दोनों पार कि अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं, कि सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा। फूल शाखों पे खिलने लगे, तुम कहो जाम रिंदों को मिलने लगे, तुम कहो खाक सीनों के सिले लगे, तुम कहो इस खुले झूठ को, जहन की लूट को मैं नहीं मानता, मैं नहीं जानता, ऐसे दस्तूर को, सुबह बेनूर को मैं नहीं मानता, मैं नहीं जानता।
We go into the main topic. I just want to walk back to 2004 when Farhan Akhtar's movie Laksh came out. There's a scene in the movie Laksh where Preeti Zinta's character, who's a journalist, is sitting in an army hospital where an army personnel has died, and she had an interaction with him earlier. So she's distraught and she says something like, "क्यों होती है ये जंग?"
सर बटालिक सब जगह यही हाल है।
I don't understand. क्यों होती है जंग? क्यों मारे जाते हैं लोग इस तरह? कब समझेंगे लोग कि इंसान की मुसीबतों का इलाज जंग नहीं, अमन है, शांति है।
Just shut up! Just shut up! ये अमन और शांति पे लेक्चर देना तो कहीं और जाओ। Get lost! देखिए, आप गलत समझ रहे हैं। तुमको अमन और शांति चाहिए, हमको भी अमन और शांति चाहिए। तो क्या करें? हाथ जोड़ के खड़े हो जाएं उनके सामने, थाली में सजा के अपना मुल्क हवाले कर दें उनके। अमन और शांति। कैप्टन अबीर सक्सेना को भी अमन और शांति चाहिए थी, पर वो तो नहीं गया था किसी के मुल्क पे हमला करने। हमला अबीर के मुल्क पे किया गया है। वो जिस सड़क, जिस जमीन पे मारा गया है, वो हिंदुस्तान की सड़क है, हिंदुस्तान की जमीन है। जाओ पहले अबीर सक्सेना की बॉडी को देखो, उसके बाद बात करना। जाओ देखो।
When I was 17 when this came out, and I too felt that there is this patriotic inevitability, that war comes out of necessity, that the lines are clearly drawn between the righteous and the reprehensible, the aggressor and the aggrieved. But over time, over the last 20 years, I have realized that wars do not happen in a vacuum, nor enmity is developed in a vacuum. They are cultivated, curated, choreographed, made out of history, ambition, fiction, and relentlessness of propaganda. In the movie Laksh, it is about an India-Pakistan war. It is about Kargil. And while Kargil in itself is the story of Pakistani aggression on India, the story of Kashmir is much more complex. However, this is not where I want to go in this.
भारत और पाकिस्तान ने की बड़े युद्ध की तैयारी, ब्रेक करिए।
So there are, broadly speaking, two kinds of people among us today. The first see their nation, India in this case, as a sacrosanct entity, morally unblemished and divinely ordained, much like a mother whose virtue is beyond question.
पाकिस्तान में मोदी का भयंकर खौफ चल रहा है। पाकिस्तान में ऊपर से नीचे तक खलबली है।
पाकिस्तान में ऐसी घबराहट है कि एटम बॉम्ब चिल्लाने पर मजबूर है वो।
The second, more tempered, slightly read in history and irony, recognize the nation state for what it is, a construct made around power, ambition, myth and memory. Yet in the present climate, what is disappointing is that the belligerent nationalism has even swept those who we have trusted to exercise critical thought. They are either parroting the language of the flag-waving faithful or choosing silence, cowed by the fear of being branded a traitor. See, this fear is not new. This fever is also not new. The fact is that the times we live in might seem special. but they bear an eerie resemblance to, say, America of the post 9/11, where the mood of the people paved the road to Iraq. Then, too, a population stunned and wounded was goaded into war. Before the invasion, 68% of Americans supported military action on Iraq. Then Colin Powell's now discredited performance at the United Nations with its solemn claims of weapons of mass destruction was enough to sway even skeptics. The evidence was fabricated. The war was real. And yet, the lie worked. And that is the anatomy of a modern war. It begins not with a gunshot, but with a story. In a world of information overload, the ability to question power has become not just unfashionable, but subversive. If everybody always lies to you, Hannah Arendt warned, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but that nobody believes anything any longer. A people unable to believe cannot decide. A people unable to decide can be made to do anything. And that is the condition in which war becomes thinkable. Today, there was an IPL game in Dharamshala, and the game was abandoned midway. And later, the BCCI, the Cricket Control Board of India, came with a statement saying, due to some technical glitches, the game was abandoned. You know why the game was abandoned in Dharamshala. I know. The people in the ground know, the players know, everybody knows. And yet, we also expect a certain amount of lie. Because this is what we are primed to be. This is what we have become now. Where we just know that even though we can see through our eyes and hear through our ears, the evidence presented to us will be something completely different. It is like living in 1984, the George Orwell novel. We just don't realize it. And how weird it is that we just accept it. Some of us believe it, but most of us, even the biggest of the bhakts, accept it as it is. And on top of it, today's general media ecosystem thrives on virality. So to go viral is to appeal to the broadest and most basic instincts: anger, fear, tribal pride. Television has started aping the internet, and news has become what they call infotainment, dressed in patriotic colors. A few years ago, Arnab Goswami declared that I don't believe in this fake objectivity. I'm an Indian and I will be on the side of India. It sounds righteous. On the surface, a lot of people will agree, accept it. But what happens when the side of India is invoked to justify violence, silence dissent, and flatten nuance? More and more of us now rely on social media and search engines, not just to access the internet, but to understand the world. These platforms don't merely reflect our interests, they shape them. According to a Reuters global survey, 82% of Indians get their news primarily from online and social media sources. And what they see is curated, not by journalists or editors, not that we trust them a lot these days, but by algorithms tuned to maximize engagement, not truth. What feels true is often prioritized over what is true. I have shared this story before, but like in 2014 when Modi was sworn in as the Prime Minister, one of my cousins sent me this WhatsApp message that Narayan Murthy has said that he has never felt as proud to be an Indian as he's feeling today because Modi has been elected as Prime Minister. And I showed them कि भाई ये तो fake news है. And they said to me, maybe it is fake, but I like it. And I think we now live in that world where even if we have an inkling that something is fake, not fully accurate, we will still be open to sharing it. And I'm talking about all sides right now. We have started to want to like the news a certain way. And the result is a moral universe where we and our kind are always just, always right, and the other, whether across the border or across the other side in the parliament, is always suspect. When there is no alternative narrative in the feed, no counterpoint to interrupt the algorithm's echo, this worldview hardens. it becomes natural, even noble, to support aggression in its name. So my question is, what does it take to be anti-war in these times? It takes the courage to doubt the familiar, the stamina to swim against the algorithmic tide, and the clarity to distinguish patriotism from propaganda. It takes a certain amount of strength to be abused, to be called naive, unpatriotic, even dangerous, for asking a question, demanding proof, or simply refusing to cheer. But most of all, it takes imagination, the ability to see a world where empathy survives borders, where dissent is not betrayal, and where the dead on the other side are mourned, not mocked. And it begins with a question, for me at least. Why do we consume the information we consume? Why do we want to like the news? There's one of my favorite novels. It's The Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. And this quote, I wish I could share it everywhere, all the time, every day. The quote is like, Englishmen are dying for England, Americans for America, Germans for Germany, Russians for Russia. There are now 50 or 60 countries fighting in this war. Surely, so many countries can't all be worth dying for. And yet, to each man in the trench or at the terminal, his nation is not just another flag among many. It is his flag, an extension of his family, his history, his very self. At the root of this near universal fervor lies something older and deeper, much deeper than jingoism. It is the emotional need to live in a just world. We do not merely want our country to be powerful. We want it to be righteous. We need to believe that we are part of something which is fundamentally good. That our inheritance is virtuous. That the land of our fathers is laminated in moral clarity. This need, known in psychology as the just world hypothesis, suggests that people are psychologically invested in believing the world is orderly, fair, and that people get what they deserve. As Melvin Lerner, who popularized the concept, explained, this belief has troubling consequences. It allows us to rationalize suffering as deserved, to blame victims for crimes against them, to justify inequality, to oppose welfare by dehumanizing its recipients as lazy or corrupt. It is no wonder then that when war arrives, we do not ask, is this just? We ask, whose side am I on? We inherit this mythology of justice, which is woven into our school textbooks, family legends, and national anthems, and then spend the rest of our lives trying to prove it true. And now social media only accelerates this self-affirmation. It delivers not information, but affirmation. We find others who share our moral mythology. Algorithms reinforce it. Soon our feeds are not mirrors, but megaphones, echoing back a world in which we and our tribe are always the protagonists. And this is how wars begin to feel not tragic, but necessary, not shameful, but heroic. Even those who should know better, academics, journalists, opposition parties, fall into line or fall silent. One of the most dispiriting aspects of our present moment, for me, has been the capitulation of India's communist parties, whose own anti-imperialist lineage should have compelled dissent. Instead, they have either endorsed the government's line or muttered equivocations, which are meaningless. I recall something that Obama said at a Hindustan Times conclave in 2017. He was asked about populist politics, and he offered a reflection. He said something like, politicians are often reflections of forces in the society. If you see a politician doing things that are questionable, one of the questions that you can ask yourself as a citizen is, am I encouraging this? The question has rarely felt more urgent to me. For in times of war, or its fevered engulfing of all of us, there is little political reward for dissent. A politician, after all, is tethered to the mood of the electorate. And if that electorate has already decided that the war is just, that we are just, then there is scant space for deviation. In the absence of a strong ideological compass or an organized movement from below, there is no incentive, moral or electoral, to stand up and say this is wrong. The prelude to the Iraq War taught us that lesson, and so does the present moment. What it takes to be anti-war today is not just courage. It is a certain amount of disloyalty to the dominant fiction of justice that our societies are built on. To be anti-war is to break the spell of righteousness, to resist the seductive lie that our side could never be the aggressor, the bully, the liar. It is to choose clarity over comfort, and that is never an easy choice. The greatest punishment for being unwilling to rule is being ruled by someone worse than oneself. This is something that Plato said in the Republic. In his text, Plato imagined this idea of the philosopher king, a ruler who does not seek power for its own sake, but rather as a means to apply wisdom to the task of governance. This ideal leader would not merely respond to crises, but reflect on their roots. He would ask not what must be done today, but what ought never to have come to pass at all. Plato contrasts this ideal ruler with the metaphor of the ship of state. The true helmsman, the man who helms the ship, he wrote, must attend to the stars, the winds, the changing seasons, not merely to the yelling of passengers or the clamor of those who wish to steer without knowing how. Even then, the pilot must be humble, for he may never know which passengers were saved or which were simply delayed from the ruin. To be anti-war in these times is to wish for such a helmsman, a philosopher in place of a crowd pleaser, someone who understands that peace is not a policy but a posture of mind. And yet democracy rarely rewards such figures. It rewards electability, not contemplation. The candidate who can best mirror the electorate's desires, however basic, primitive, however momentary, is the one who wins. The pursuit of wisdom, in contrast, demands silence, humility, delay. Wisdom has no campaign slogan. And this is the tragic paradox of modern politics. Democracy gives us the right to choose, but not necessarily the tools to choose wisely. We mistake charisma for character, certainty for clarity, strength for vision. We elect those who promise swift retribution, not those who ask what made us vengeful in the first place. War in this world becomes the ultimate spectacle of strength, easy to sell, impossible to recall. And so we blame the leaders who stoke war, but rarely ask why so many among us hunger for it. We speak of statesmen with reverence, but reward the salesman. We call for peace, but vote for those who chant louder, not think deeper. India does offer instructive examples. Blame me, call me, but Nehru, for all his flaws, often governed with the long arc of history in mind. His decisions like non-alignment or focusing on institutions of science and democracy were not popular, not even popular at that time, but they were grounded in an idea of India, of what India ought to become. He could do this in part because he arrived with the moral capital of the independence movement. His successors inherited a nation, but not his imagination. The current Prime Minister too came to power with a different form of public credit. His decisions, though, like demonetization, demanding public sacrifice, Pulwama, Tali Thali Bajao, these are all clogged more in spectacle than deliberation. Whether they stand the test of time remains to be seen. But what seems absent across decades, across parties, is the statesman who speaks not to win the next election, but to avert the next war. To be anti-war in these times, then, is to reject both the tribal instincts of the crowd and the vanity of its leaders. It is to demand more than strength from our rulers. It is to ask who among you can bear the weight of peace, not merely as absence of war, but as an active and arduous moral position. For now, we are still waiting. See, an examined life is the only true antidote to the machinery of war. But examination is rare, because adopting an ideology is not typically a deliberate act. It is more often a slow sedimentation of unchosen loyalties to nation, to religion, to inherited definitions of right and wrong. People do not become pro-war by waking up cruel one day. They drift into it by refusing to ask how they came to believe what they believe. The just world hypothesis, that comforting lie that the world rewards virtue and punishes vice, makes skepticism feel unnecessary. It teaches us to mistake luck for justice, power for truth. It is this illusion that makes forwarding a militant meme or sharing a jingoistic news clip feel righteous. One half-truth, animated by tribal emotion, can snowball into national consensus, not out of hatred, but from an innocent belief that our side must be good because we are on it. But meaning drawn from ready-made ideologies, especially when they come from family, myths, or algorithmic feeds, is a counterfeit of insight. It mimics the joy of discovery without any of its labor. Inherited ideology shortcuts the slow, honest work of building a worldview with the easy clarity of slogans and enemies. In this way, war readiness becomes not just political but psychological, part of our architecture of meaning. Think about us. From our homes that talk about the valor of our family, the hard works that our parents did, usually the fathers, to our schools that make us pray to the idea of nation, take pledges, to the social media, to the government, to everything around us. We are prepared in such a way that we think of our nation as righteous. And I was saying this to someone today, that there is very little that is common between a Punjabi and a Tamil, a Bengali and a Gujarati, except the fact that they are all part of India. Even our rituals, the gods we worship, the kind of food we eat are all different. But we are all part of India. And I think for the early India, and even now maybe, it is very important to hold this thread of patriotism to ensure that federation of India stays intact. And if you think about it, in the past, in the 80s and 90s, this propaganda was done via things like Mele Sur Mera Tumhara, Ek Chidiya Anek Chidiya. All of this is propaganda. But the thing is that we need something to hold us together, because for most of our lives, we will call ourselves Indian without knowing 99.9% other Indians. And yet we will all be part of the same team.
रिलोकेट किए गए मिसाइल लॉन्चर्स, बड़ी खबर, पाकिस्तानी बॉर्डर के नजदीक भारत की बड़ी सैन्य तैयारी, ब्रेक करिए।
आतंक परस्त पाकिस्तान का हलक डर की वजह से सूखता चला जा रहा है।
So to be anti-war today, then, is to resist this architecture that exists around us. It is to resist the story that tells us we are always the hero, that violence is always defensive, that justice always wears our flag. It is to insist that the love of one's country must not be allowed to override love for humanity. And that peace is not the absence of warmongering, but the refusal to be flattered by it. No one thinks of themselves as the villain, but few suspect that their lens on the world may already be warped by history, by media, by fear dressed as duty. And so, as wars simmer or rage across continents and timelines, we remain dangerously confident in our own side's innocence. Our collective task in this age of infinite information and finite reflection is to be wary of how seductive righteousness can be, especially when it is accompanied by the thrill of certainty and the applause of the crowd. Because as Charles Dickens warned, in seasons of pestilence, some of us will have a secret affliction, an affliction to the disease, a terrible passing inclination to die of it. And perhaps in this season of war, many of us are secretly drawn not to peace, but to the catharsis of violence. The hard part, the truly radical act, is to resist it. And if I can leave you with anything, I want to leave you with this quote by Arundhati Roy from The Cost of Living. This is perhaps my most favorite quote, line that I have loved since the moment that I've read it. It goes, to love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and the vulgar disparity of life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, and above all, to watch, to try, and to understand, to never look away, and never, never to forget. Thank you.
This is a song by an old comrade from Pakistan, a poet by the name of Habib Jalib. It's called Dastoor, and it's about the law. Like Dastoor literally means constitution, so it's about the constitution, the law, the idea that rules our land, and how it is something that is not acceptable to us because it is fundamentally against the people that populate this land. बताते रहते हैं सरहद के दोनों पार कि अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं, कि सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा। फूल शाखों पे खिलने लगे, तुम कहो जामरिन इस खुले झूठ को, जहन की लूट को मैं नहीं मानता, मैं नहीं जानता। ऐसे दस्तूर को, सुबह बेनूर को मैं नहीं मानता, मैं नहीं जानता। तुमने लूटा है सदियों सदियों, तुमने लूटा है सदियों हमारा सुकून। अब न हम पर चलेगा तुम्हारा फसूल। चार घर दर्द मंदों के बनते हो क्यों, चार घर दर्द मंदों के बनते हो क्यों। तुम नहीं चार अगर कोई माने मगर मैं नहीं मानता,